When I accidentally realized what my son and his wife were plotting, it felt as if the ground had vanished beneath my feet. Every word I heard seemed to hammer straight into my heart, and the shock was so intense that I could barely breathe. It was incredible how someone so close could hide such a cruel intention, and in that instant all my trust seemed to evaporate. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what I was hearing, as if each syllable were a stab that would never heal. It's curious how life teaches us that betrayal often comes from the places we least expect. I couldn't understand how years of dedication, care, and love could be dismissed so easily. I had always imagined my family would be my safe harbor, yet now everything seemed to slip like sand through my fingers. It was as if every gesture of affection I had offered had become a bargaining chip in a plot of betrayal. In that moment, I realized that blind trust doesn't always protect, and love doesn't guarantee reciprocity. Even today, I remember the overwhelming sense of powerlessness that washed over me. As I listened, my heart swirled between sadness, anger, and disbelief. My mind tried to rationalize, but the emotion was overwhelming, almost suffocating. I kept asking myself, how could someone I raised, educated, and loved betray me like this? It was a painful lesson about the fragility of human relationships and how quickly trust can be shattered. It's remarkable how pain can reveal strengths we didn't even know existed within us. And at the same time as the pain, a strange clarity began to emerge. I realized I needed to act, that I couldn't let myself be consumed by betrayal without taking control. Life was showing me that the harshest challenges often bring opportunities to learn, grow stronger, and protect what truly matters. The shock was still there, but something else had awakened. A quiet instinct to restart, to defend. And it was in that whirlwind of emotions that I began to understand that nothing would ever be the same again. Before we continue, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel Vengeance Stories Vintage. We're building a community of incredible women who know that our best chapters can happen at any age. Now back to the story. When my husband passed away, I felt as if the world had lost a vital piece, but I didn't have time to drown in grief. I had a son to raise, and that responsibility gave me strength I didn't even know I had. I took double shifts, worked nights and weekends, and every single coin I earned was carefully saved. It wasn't just about survival. It was about planting seeds so he could have a better life than mine. And deep inside, I was certain that all the effort would be worth it. I remember nights when I would collapse on the couch, exhausted, hands sore from work, but my heart warmed by watching him sleep peacefully. While many spent their money on fleeting pleasures, I made tough choices. Giving up new clothes, trips, small luxuries. Every penny saved meant another opportunity for him to study, grow, and achieve. It was a trade I made with my eyes closed, convinced that he would one day understand its value. I always believed his words, his promises to take care of me when my time to rest came. Perhaps that's why I gave so much, believing that raising a child was also building a bond of gratitude and respect that would last forever. I saw myself as a bridge he would cross to reach the future, and my mission was to keep it sturdy no matter the weight upon it. There was no room to think about myself because my life was completely intertwined with his. Those years of sacrifice shaped not only the man he would become but also the woman I needed to be. I became resilient, strategic, and tireless. And while I worked, I held on to the hope that one day I could sit down and hear him say, "Mom, now it's my turn to take care of you." I didn't know yet that life had very different plans. When I met Olivia, I confess I felt a sense of relief. She was polite, kind, always smiling, and spoke with sweetness. I thought, finally, my son has found someone who will add to his life. Our first meetings were pleasant, full of light conversation and laughter, and I saw no reason to suspect otherwise. It was as if she had been tailor-made to fit into our family. But little by little, small details started to catch my attention. She asked seemingly innocent questions, but they always revolved around possessions, money, and especially my house. At first, I answered naturally, thinking it was mere curiosity. But the frequency and insistence began to bother me. It was as if behind the smile there was a calculated plan. Life had already taught me that not everything that glitters is gold. And even without proof, something inside me lit up a silent alarm every time she insisted on learning details about my financial life. That kind of intuition is like a sixth sense you develop after facing hardships. You can't explain it, you just feel it. I began paying more attention to the subtext, to the glances, and the way she reacted to my answers. Still, I decided not to say anything to my son at that moment. I knew any word from me could be seen as jealousy or fussiness. I preferred to observe, to gather small pieces like assembling a puzzle I secretly didn't want to complete. But as days passed, that uneasy feeling grew, and I had no idea this was only the first sign of a much larger storm. It was an ordinary afternoon when the phone rang, and I answered without suspecting what was about to happen. My son had called me, but by the end of the conversation he forgot to hang up. At first I heard distant sounds, muffled voices, and almost hung up thinking it was just background noise. But within seconds the words began to become clear, and what I heard hit me like a punch to the chest. These weren't loose phrases or misunderstandings. They were clear, articulated plans, and to my shock they came from him and Olivia. They spoke about how they could facilitate the transfer of the house into their names and how to ensure I wouldn't have access to my own money. My son's voice sounded cold, calculating, almost like a stranger's. Olivia, meanwhile, seemed to set the pace of the conversation, orchestrating each step. At that moment, it felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. The floor seemed to spin beneath me and my hands shook as I gripped the phone, holding it like a live piece of evidence of a crime. Every second of that conversation chipped away another piece of trust. I wasn't just disappointed. I was facing the realization that the two people who should have protected me were plotting against me. That's when I realized there was no room for naivety. I was dealing with manipulative people, capable of wearing masks for years and acting with surgical coldness. It was the turning point. Something inside me awoke, not in despair but as a survival instinct. I knew that from that moment on, every step would have to be calculated, and that the game was only beginning. My first reaction was the urge to confront them, to look them in the eyes and tell them I knew everything. But I realized almost immediately that it would only put me at a disadvantage. Manipulative people are experts at twisting stories and distorting facts, and I couldn't afford to give them a chance to prepare. I took a deep breath, swallowed my anger, and understood that if I wanted to win, I would need to play a different game. That's when I decided to wear the mask they expected. The mask of the naive, gentle, and trusting mother. I kept smiling, asking about their plans as if I knew nothing, maintaining the routine as it had always been. This didn't mean weakness, it meant strategy. I was creating a scenario where they felt safe to act, without realizing that each move they made gave me more information. I started mentally noting every comment, every glance, every attempt to probe my assets. When they asked about my house or my accounts, I answered vaguely, revealing only what was convenient. It was like playing chess. Every word a carefully moved piece, knowing that one reckless move could ruin the entire game. This self-control demanded more strength than any physical labor I had ever done. I was living among people planning to destroy my future, yet I had to smile and offer coffee as if it were just another family afternoon. But inside, my plan was already taking shape, and I knew that at the right moment the final move would change everything. After days of maintaining the posture of a confident, naive mother, I felt it was time to seek someone who could guide me safely. I remembered Miguel, a lawyer trusted by a friend, a discreet man with an impeccable reputation. I called him and with a trembling voice recounted everything I had discovered. He listened carefully without interruption, understanding that there was more here than a simple family dispute. We arranged a meeting, and I brought with me the papers my son had left for me to sign when I had time. I hadn't touched them since, but something told me this would be the crucial point. Miguel examined each page with a clinical eye, and after a few minutes he sighed with concern. These were not ordinary authorizations or routine documents. It was a full power of attorney, capable of giving my son and Olivia total control over my house, my accounts, and any assets in my name. When I heard that, a chill ran down my spine. I knew they were plotting something, but I never imagined they had gone this far. Miguel, calm and composed, explained that the law could be on my side, but I would need to be extremely strategic. Any misstep could alert them and they could move even faster to harm me. That was the moment I fully understood that I couldn't act on emotion. If I wanted to protect my assets and my dignity, every move had to be planned like in a silent battle, where intelligence mattered more than brute force. And in that instant I decided that I would not only defend myself, but also make sure they would never attempt something like this again. Once I grasped the gravity of the situation, Miguel and I met to devise a plan that would not only protect me but also turn the game in my favor. He knew that dealing with cunning people required patience and precision. The first step was practical and immediate, changing all the locks in the house, ensuring that only I had the new keys. That small change already restored a bit of the sense of security I had lost. Next, we moved to something deeper. My will. We rewrote everything, making it clear that my assets were protected and designated for people and institutions I trusted. At the same time, we created a false version. A document that, in my son's and Olivia's eyes, would give them exactly what they wanted. This bait would be the centerpiece to keep them confident and distracted while I reinforced my protection. Miguel also advised me to maintain my appearance of naivety, continuing to feed them carefully controlled information. I needed them to believe the path was clear, that they were only steps away from winning. It was like watching a play in which I, in disguise, acted the role they wanted to see, while behind the scenes the entire plot unfolded in the opposite way. This strategy required more than coldness. It demanded emotional discipline. I was dealing with the fact that my own son believed he was deceiving me when in reality he was the one being led. And even with the pain of that realization, there was a quiet strength inside me telling me that, at the right moment, this performance would reveal far more than they could imagine. The day my son decided to act came faster than I expected. He left the house early, looking rushed, carrying the folder where I knew the false documents Miguel and I had prepared were kept. I, for my part, stayed at home trying to remain calm as every minute felt like an eternity. It was like waiting for the final act of a play I had helped write myself. At the bank, he presented the papers with all the confidence of someone who thought they had won. The manager, previously instructed by Miguel, received the material with his usual professionalism, but discreetly triggered the agreed-upon protocol. The authenticity was verified, and while my son waited, the police were informed, all without raising any suspicion. Every detail was executed with surgical precision. At home, I gripped my rosary tightly, praying that nothing would go wrong. I knew that any mistake could turn the game against me. Every phone ring made me hold my breath, and every sound outside made me imagine that something had gone awry. It was like walking on a tightrope. One false step and everything could collapse. Minutes later, I received a call from Miguel. His firm, calm voice brought immediate relief. The plan had worked. My son hadn't just failed in his attempt. He was now facing the legal consequences of his actions. But I knew this story wasn't over yet. What came next would demand a strength from me that went beyond legal strategy. Facing my son that day was, without a doubt, one of the most painful and necessary moments of my life. The meeting was arranged in a neutral location, under supervision, to ensure everything remained within legal and safety limits. When he arrived, I saw a mix of surprise and discomfort in his eyes, as if he were trying to guess why I was there with such a firm demeanor. I would no longer smile to hide my emotions. I was ready to say everything. I began by recalling some moments from our life together, not to appeal to emotion, but to make it clear that I knew exactly what he was putting at risk. Then I laid out the evidence on the table. The recorded conversations, the false documents he believed were real, and Miguel's report. There was no room for excuses or distortions. Each piece of evidence spoke for itself, like a mirror reflecting his intentions undeniably. He tried for a few moments to divert the subject, to find justifications that even sounded empty to him. But faced with the solid proof, his expression changed. I, keeping a calm tone, made it clear that there was still a way out. Formally renounce any claim to my assets and never attempt to approach them again with hidden intentions. This was not just a demand. It was the only condition to prevent matters from escalating into more serious consequences. His signature on that document was a silent moment, yet heavy with significance. I didn't feel victory or complete relief, only the certainty that I was closing a chapter one never imagined living through. As I stood to leave, I looked at him for a moment and realized that this conversation not only changed our relationship but also marked a point of no return. Yet I knew there was still something that needed to be said and done for the story to be truly complete. After my son signed the renunciation and the separation agreement, I felt that I had regained not only my assets but also control over my own life. It was like lifting an anchor that had kept me trapped at the bottom of the sea. However, I knew one final chapter remained to close this story: confronting Olivia. She wasn't used to losing, and defeat seemed to wound her pride more than anything else. The encounter was tense. Olivia arrived with the same air of false elegance and superiority she always carried, trying to intimidate me with insinuations and a deliberately threatening tone. But I was no longer the woman she thought she could manipulate. I laid out the evidence of her involvement in the plan, recordings, messages, and witness statements. Denial was impossible. With every page I turned, her confident expression changed, and that sparkle of arrogance disappeared. I spoke firmly without raising my voice. I told her she could live her life, but far from mine and my assets, and that any future attempt would be dealt with just as strictly, or even more so. This was no longer a plea or request. It was a declaration of non-negotiable boundaries. For the first time I saw Olivia speechless, simply digesting the reality that her game was over. Leaving that conversation, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: lightness. I realized it is better to be alone than surrounded by people waiting for my death to benefit themselves. And as I closed the door behind me, I understood that it wasn't just about protecting what I have, but protecting who I am. And this time I was certain no one would cross that line with impunity again. After confronting Olivia, it felt as if an old weight had been lifted from my shoulders. It was a strange sensation, like finally waking from a nightmare that had lasted for years. For the first time in a long time, I breathed deeply without feeling that knot in my chest. The anger and hurt were still there, but now accompanied by something new: freedom. As I walked through the house, my eyes scanned every corner, every piece of furniture, every photograph. Each object seemed to whisper stories, and unfortunately many of them carried more pain than joy. I realized that this place, once my refuge, had become an emotional prison. Selling the house wasn't just a practical decision, it was a symbolic act, proof that I was ready to leave the past behind. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Good memories mingled with the bad like stuck pages in an old book. But I had to turn the page. I put the house up for sale and began imagining my new life. A small, quiet place, where each wall would hold only the memories I chose to create. A home that was truly mine, free from the shadows of ingratitude and others' expectations. When I sold my old house and moved into the apartment in Georgia, I felt a mixture of anxiety and excitement. Each box I unpacked carried not just objects, but memories I was choosing to leave behind. For the first time in many years, I was creating a home that reflected only who I was now, without the shadow of anyone else's expectations. It was liberating to feel that every decision was mine and mine alone. Decorating the apartment was like painting on a blank canvas. I chose colors, furniture, and details that made me smile, that brought me peace and comfort. Every corner had a story, but it was a story I wrote. I discovered that small details like a curtain or a lamp could completely transform both the space and my mood. It was my life, finally under my control. I began walking through the neighborhood with fresh eyes, noticing every cafe, every park, every street corner that had once seemed like just another street. The city vibrated and I vibrated with it. I could stroll without rush, set my own schedule, make friends, and allow myself new experiences without depending on anyone. I felt light, free, and in charge of my own destiny. With each passing day, the feeling of living for myself grew stronger. There was no longer fear, pressure, or obligations to those who didn't deserve my trust. I discovered the joy of making choices without needing to justify anything, and the freedom to simply exist and savor each moment. And in this new beginning, I realized there was still so much life left to live. Soon after settling in Georgia, I began recognizing familiar faces in hallways and nearby cafes. Shy greetings turned into lively conversations, and soon we were planning small gatherings. Meeting neighbors with similar interests gave me a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in years. Gradually, these interactions blossomed into genuine friendships, and I realized that building bonds is essential for the soul. We formed a group that met regularly for games, dinners, and even cultural outings. Each gathering was an opportunity to laugh, share experiences, and learn from one another. I was surprised at how easily I could open up and trust new people again. It was as if, through these small interactions, my life was being filled with colors I had forgotten existed. With every new meeting, I felt my energy renew. Casual conversations and mutual support created a positive environment, where everyone contributed to the group's well-being. I discovered that being surrounded by good company not only brought joy but also strengthened our confidence and self-esteem. It was invigorating to realize that I could trust other adults to share simple, meaningful moments. Over time, I realized my life had changed radically. I was no longer the woman trapped in past pain. Now I was surrounded by friends who supported me, laughed with me, and helped me see life from a light, positive perspective. Recovering that joy and trust in myself was liberating. and it showed me that even after great losses, it's possible to build healthy, meaningful relationships. 8 months later, my phone rang, and on the other end was Olivia. Her voice sounded concerned, as if trying to convey urgency and care. For a moment, I felt that familiar pang of distrust. Something inside me flickered a silent warning. This wasn't genuine concern, but another attempt to get close with ulterior motives. She began talking about Manuel, mentioning problems and struggles, trying to evoke my sympathy. But with the experience I had gained over these months, I quickly recognized it as a mask. Every word, every pause was calculated to create emotional pressure, and possibly a financial gain. My intuition, now sharper than ever, prevented me from falling into her trap. I kept my voice calm, firm, showing no vulnerability. I made it clear that any attempt to interfere in my life or with my assets would be met with caution, and if necessary, legal measures. I would not allow her to lead me through fear or guilt. It was my turn to set the rules, and my emotional safety was the priority. It was a moment of reaffirmation. I learned that protecting oneself is not coldness, but intelligence and self-love. Establishing clear boundaries not only shielded me from old manipulations but also strengthened my confidence. And when I hung up the phone, I felt the tranquility of someone who finally understands that no one can cross the line of respect without consequences. One morning, leaving the building, I came across Manuel, standing there with a tense look and an expression of someone who no longer knew how to act. The weight of the past seemed reflected in his posture. He was no longer the son I knew, but someone visibly desperate and confused. That unexpected encounter brought back painful memories, but also gave me the opportunity to show that I had changed and learned from every experience. He tried, with calculated words, to induce guilt and imply that he could still manipulate me. But this time I didn't yield. I kept my voice firm and confident, making it clear that his attempts at control or intimidation would no longer work. Every sentence I spoke was like a mirror reflecting the truth. I would no longer be deceived or manipulated. As we spoke, I noticed his impatience growing with each word I uttered. And at the same time, I felt an inner strength I had never imagined having. The experience taught me not only to recognize manipulative tactics but also to act with confidence and intelligence when faced with them. I didn't need to shout or react with anger. My security and firmness spoke for themselves. As I walked away, I felt a mix of relief and clarity. I had faced directly the son who tried to harm me, and even without external victories, I knew that interaction solidified my autonomy. Each lesson learned transformed pain into strength, and I understood concretely that I was finally protected and at peace with my decisions. After all the turmoil I had lived through, I realized my experience didn't have to remain just a story of pain. I decided to transform it into something greater, creating a foundation dedicated to protecting the elderly from family abuse like what I had faced myself. It was a way to give meaning to everything I had endured, turning suffering into hope for others. The idea that my pain could save lives gave me a sense of purpose I had never felt before. Planning the foundation required dedication and attention to detail, just as when I needed to protect my assets. Every step, every decision was guided by the desire to ensure that no one else would have to go through what I had. It was rewarding to see how small gestures, resources, and strategic actions could create real impact in the lives of vulnerable people. More than donating money or resources, I wanted to offer security, support, and guidance. Every plan I made for the foundation carried the experience of my own life, allowing the mistakes and successes I had lived through to serve as a guide for others. I discovered that turning pain into purpose is one of the most powerful acts a person can achieve, and that positive impact multiplies when done with heart and strategy. Today, looking toward the future, I feel that I have not only protected my assets and dignity but also built a legacy that goes beyond myself. My story, which began with betrayal and manipulation, has now become a source of inspiration, protection, and hope for many. I've learned that even in the most painful situations, we can create opportunities for good, and that every conscious decision can change lives, including our own. With Miguel by my side and a team of dedicated volunteers, the foundation has grown remarkably. Every achievement, every story of someone protected or helped, reminded me why it all started. Seeing vulnerable people find support and security through our work was more rewarding than any material accomplishment I had ever achieved. We offer legal guidance, psychological support, and even financial advice to those needing to rebuild their lives. Every case we handled was an opportunity to transform pain into learning and hope. I realized that helping others not only changes external lives but also strengthens my own resilience and gratitude. My routine is now unlike anything I lived before. Meetings, visits, planning, and moments of celebration with the team. I feel surrounded by true friendship, companionship, and people committed to doing good. Every challenge we faced was tackled collectively, teaching me that mutual support and purpose make any obstacle lighter. Looking back at where I came from fills me with pride and emotion. The life I rebuilt is not only secure and fulfilling but also full of meaning. I've discovered that even after betrayals and losses, it is possible to create a new chapter filled with purpose, friendship, and opportunities. My story shows that pain can be transformed into strength, and adversity into real opportunities for growth and positive impact. Share your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your perspective. And if this story made you reflect, like the video and subscribe to the channel to follow other real, intense stories like this one. Because in the end, every story is an opportunity to see life with new eyes.